What is the difference between the is and as operators in C#? First, let's go over the basic quickly, and then I'm going to show several code samples that demonstrate the usage of the is and as operators in C#. Let's start with the is operator. What is the purpose of the is operator in C#? It is used to check if the runtime type of an object is compatible with a given type. The is operator has a Boolean return type. That means it is going to return true if the object type is compatible, otherwise it is going to return false. And when it comes to the exception, performance, pattern matching, and common use cases, you can actually pause the screen and read them on your own. Now let's go over the as operator quickly before we get to the code examples. Its purpose, it is used to perform a safe cast of an object to a specified type. When it comes to its return value, it returns the object cast to the target type if the cast is actually possible, and otherwise it returns null. Okay, when it comes to the exceptions, this is actually quite important as far as the as operator is concerned. It does not throw an invalid cast exception, and if the cast is not valid, it simply returns null. So this is something quite important to remember. And also, you cannot use the as operator with the non-nullable value types. If you try to do that, you're going to get a compile time error. And again, as far as the performance, common use cases, and limitations are concerned, you can pause the screen now and read about them on your own. Okay, this is the first code example, which demonstrates the use of the is operator in C#. I have my abstract class, which is called shape. It has a single method, which is called getArea. And then I have two derived classes. The first one, let me just move this back. The first one is circle, which inherits from shape. We have the circle radius, which is set in the constructor. And we implement the getArea method, which simply calculates the area of the circle, which is pi multiplied by the radius 2 times. And finally, we have the rectangle class, which also inherits from shape. And we have the width and the height of the rectangle, which are set in the constructor again. And we have the getArea method, which returns the width multiplied by the height, which is the area of our rectangle. And now let's take a look at the main method. This is where we actually use the is operator right here. So let's assume we have a list of shapes. Right now I have only 3 shapes, but you can have 100, 200, it doesn't really matter. And we have no idea what kind they are. So I have one rectangle, one circle, and the last one is also a rectangle. And your task as a programmer is to calculate the sum of the areas of all the rectangles in this list of shapes. So this is how we do it. We simply loop through each shape, and right here, we check if the shape is a rectangle. And if it is, we add its area to our double variable, which is total rectangle area. And finally, we print the result. Let's run the program quickly, just to make sure that it works. And it gives us the total area of all rectangles is 32. And you can see the code. We have the area right here is 20 and here is 12, which if you add the 2 numbers, you get 32. So our code actually works. Okay, if you remember from earlier, starting with C#7, the is operator can be used with pattern matching to both test an expression and get its value in a single operation, which is what we do right here. So let's say we have an object, which is John, and here we simultaneously check if object is string. This is the part of the code that does that. And then if object is string, then we can use the value s the way we use a string. So if I run this code, I should get the name is John. Let's do that. Okay, let's move it here. And then we have the name is John. Now, what is going to happen if I replace the value with an integer? Okay, you see, we're going to get a compile time error, which says an expression of type int cannot be handled by a pattern of type string, which means that we cannot do this if the object is not of the expected type. we can still use the is operator to perform the check. Let me comment this out. So this is still valid. We can perform the check, and if the check passes, we can do whatever we want inside the code, but we cannot actually get the value of this object if the two types are different. And this is our second code example, which demonstrates the usage of the as operator in C#. Again, we have a abstract class which is called UI element. We have two derived classes. The first one is text box, and the second one is button. Now, in the text box, we have the text box, which is set using the setText method, and we override the toString method to return text box followed by the actual text on the text box. Similar to the text box, in the button class, we have a button label, and we override the toString method to return button followed by the button label. Now, let's go to the main method. Again, we have a collection, and this collection is of UI elements this time. We have two text boxes and one button, and we set the initial text for the first text box as initial text, and then for the second text box as another text. And inside this code, we safely loop through each element, and we actually safely use the as operator in C# to perform the cast. If you remember from earlier, this line of code should not throw an invalid cast exception if this cast is not valid. And if the cast is not valid, it will actually return null, which means if I loop through these list of UI elements, once I get to the button, the cast is obviously not going to be valid, but this is not going to throw an exception. It is simply going to set the text box to null. And then in the next line of code, we check if the text box is null, and if it is not, we use the setText method of the text box to change the text of each one of the text box. Now, let's run the code to see if it actually works. We started with one text box with initial text, and the second text box with another text. And inside this loop, we check if any of these elements is a text box, and we change it to new text. And as you can see, the result, the first text box now have a new text, and the last one has a new text, and our button has the same label as before, which is click me. And the last point I want to make about the as operator, if you remember from earlier, if you try to use the as operator with a non-nullable value types like int or double, you will get a compile time error. Now let's demonstrate this. We have a object which is 123, and we have a number which is equal to object as nullable int, and then we can perform a check, and we should see this line printed to the console. So let's run the program, and you can see we have successfully casted to nullable int 123. Now, what happens if I try to cast to int? Well, you see I have a compile time error, and it says the as operator must be used with a reference type or nullable type. And that was another quick tutorial which tried to explain the usage of the is and as operators in C#. If you find this useful, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching.